Welcome to Cross Currents, where ASRA network members get together in conversation to explore the dynamics, disruptors, and discoveries shaping our world. ASRA is an independent initiative, home to 90-plus network members, that aims to mainstream systemic risk assessment in policy and decision-making in response to current and future challenges. This series is entirely member-driven. Network members identify the pressing issues in systemic risk and connect with each other to explore them more deeply in conversations. So the views you're going to hear today are those of the three of us and don't necessarily reflect ASRA's institutional positions. So I'm Rob Lempert, principal researcher at RAND, a public policy research organization. I'm joined by Mariana Rondon and Stella Ladi. Mariana is Deputy Executive Director, Plataforma CIPO, and Stella is Professor of Public Policy at Queen Mary University of London and Pantheon University, Athens. So today, the three of us are going to talk about how we experts at ASRA can best contribute our knowledge to addressing systemic risk in a society undergoing transformational change. You know, a debate we're having here at RAND, as I'm sure is happening in many other places, is the extent to which we are living in an elastic or plastic moment. An elastic moment is a period of disruption after which we snap back to something familiar. A plastic moment, by contrast, is molding a future very different than the one we've had before. So I very much think we're in a plastic moment, one in which transformational change, for good or bad, is now inevitable. This, though, creates a paradox for those of us offering expert policy advice. We need experts more than ever, because unaided intuition will fail us as we leap into the great unknown. At the same time, transformational change makes communication among experts, decision makers, and the public harder. We experts will be caught by surprise by novel shifts, just like everybody else, and consequential policy decisions will often present questions we can't easily answer. So this question seems to be at the heart of ASRA's mission of mainstreaming systemic risk assessment. So how do we experts make our knowledge useful during these plastic times? This is a challenge I've been struggling with in both my professional and personal life. More on that a bit. But now, Stella and Mariana, let me ask both of you, where and have you seen this dynamic play out in your work and your experience, and any initial thoughts on how to best address this challenge?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Rob. Maybe I'll start, Mariana, and then you carry on.
That'd be great.
So, yeah, that's a very nice way to put the time that we are in. Yeah, and actually, it's I think I totally agree with what you're saying, that expertise and experts' advice will remain very important no matter what kind of a time we are into, if it is an elastic or a plastic, and maybe it is a plastic. But expertise is still important because the challenges are the same. What we don't know, it's the future. Having looked a little bit at what both of you are doing, I think it's very close also to some of the conclusions that I have come to with my work. We can't have just experts' advice without knowing what the people think. So somehow we need expertise and co-creation at the same time. And this was not there when evidence-informed policymaking was first came into existence and became popular in public policy. So I think now, more than ever, it's very important to have the two coming together, but at the same time, acknowledging that the two sides, experts and the community, are bringing in different types of knowledge that are not, maybe sometimes they will be in conflict. And there we need to sit down and find ways to move forward, because more than anything, we need trust to each other in order for expertise to make sense.
Rob, Stella, a pleasure to be here with you today to discuss such an important topic. And I want to start actually by giving a bit of global context on where we are and why this topic is precisely so timely and so important. So as we know, we are living a globalized, interconnected world more than we ever seen before. And the way we used to look for risks no longer works. We used to look for risks in an isolated way, but the fact is that the nature of risk has changed so much. We are living such a challenging and I would say difficult moment. And that, as specialists, take us to another place. We need to change everything, the way we used to do things, the tools we used to use in order to face this that we are currently living. So we are living what we call this polycrisis of multiple crises happening at the same time, alongside with democratic backsliding, global polarization, an overload of information, but also of misinformation, which is quite serious, a global governance and a multilateral system that are totally fragmented, and that take us to a lower level of collective capacity to respond to these systemic risks. So I think these are the main challenge that we are living, because we are living a paradox.
And there's so many ways to kind of, windows into this challenge. One that I find salient and challenging, troubling, but is, sort of this tension between fear of change and, desire of need for change. And I think ultimately we need to try to get at that in some sort of co-creation, but it's really challenging, that people don't, are disaffected with the way things are running. They know they need change, but in general, but any specific one, they start thinking about and they get terrified by. I've been very focused on things going in the U.S. where I live, but in our no one is happy with our electoral system, so the way it polarizes people. And there were, roughly in a dozen different states, measures on the ballot to do various reforms, ranked choice voting, other sorts of electoral forms that, we experts think reduce polarization, which no one likes. And they almost uniformly all lost because people were scared of doing something different. And so they retreated back to, what they were familiar with, even though they hate it. And it's, that just seems to be one of the feedback cycles that are, we sure need ways to pry open.
Actually, it's such a coincidence, because today we just had an article accepted on fear and why people did not choose any of why people wouldn't get vaccinated no matter what policy was used. Yeah, so we were trying to see if there was anything that could be done for the unvaccinated to get vaccinated during the COVID. And we discovered, we were working with the social psychologists, that exactly what was stopping people from actually liking any of the policies was fear. So, it's really exactly what you are saying. And what we were ending up thinking with the team when we were, reviewing our data, and then we're thinking how this can be useful for policy making, in reality is that we should actually embrace this fear and stop talking about this fear as a negative. So fear should just become one more aspect of how anyone works, policymakers, citizens. And if we embrace it, it means that we become in a way less polarized, because then we can understand why people do not vaccinate, or why people would not follow one of the policies, or why conspiracy theories exist. Because, our sample was showing that people that developed conspiracy theories were the ones that were the most fearful. So it was just a reaction, yeah? So working more with psychologists and really saying fear is part of who we are, and we should put it in the equation when we're actually making policy proposals, in this new world, which is full of systemic risk, maybe this will help us come up with not different propositions. I'm not saying this will make our proposals and our propositions less revolutionary or less, but at least to find the process to explain and to bring as many people together in this. And in a way, this is related to what I was saying before about co-creation. But I'm not exactly sure how we can do it, but I think this is the direction. And I'll stop again here. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is a key topic for us as specialists, because when we look to fear, and as Rob said, everything that is not familiar, that we are not familiar with, we tend to fear. And in the end of the day, we are talking much more about uncertainties, what we don't know, than what we know. And this is something extremely difficult for us as a specialist that deals with crisis and risk management. First, to understand that we don't know many things. And second, how to make this in a practical way that we can, as Stella said, embrace this uncertainty, because in the end of the day, we have so many tools, so many methodologies looking to quantify risks. But when we look in the end of the days, the reality is that, and this is really scary to say and to think, that there are so many elements that we don't control and we don't even know. And so that put us in one way, in a very challenging position, but also in a very stimulated for us to think in terms of new and in a creative and bold new models and tools to work with.
Do you have any favorite examples or, places that, you've seen, either people or agencies, do a better job of at least pulling together a couple of these strands of managing systemic risk?
Yes, when you pose this question, Rob, to me it comes, unfortunately, looking to the global level, some of negative impact and some of the negative examples, such as Stella was mentioning, the pandemic. I think we lost a huge opportunity to look differently for systemic risk. It's clear that we fail as a civilization to manage the pandemic as a whole. We were able to do in a few countries, in a few communities, but we were not able to do it collectively as we expected. And I think we lost a huge, huge opportunity. But on the other hand, there are several initiatives. I know that you both work and have some practical examples to share as well.
Yeah.
Can I disagree a little bit with Mariana?
Sure.
Please. That's the idea.
On that we failed as a humanity with the pandemic. I think we are very quick to say that we are failing. It was a huge challenge. We didn't respond as a globe. You're very right. But we have to remember that in 2025, which was one of the worst years for multilateralism, we agreed on a pandemic agreement at the WHO. For me, this is not failure. This is learning. It means that we learned. It means that we realized that we could have cooperated better. And actors like the European Union that actually were part of the failure because they gathered a lot of vaccines for Europe, but did not distribute equally to the rest of the globe, took a leading role in WHO to actually have a new pandemic agreement. So I'm just saying that because it's our view of things really matters. Our reading of what happens matters and can help in the way we move forward. So I would say, we also as experts have to trying to see what is failure, what is success, when are we actually maybe making small steps, we could make bigger ones, but still. And then I want to turn the question, Robert, to you, because I think you're doing done quite a lot of interesting work in LA after the fires,
Yeah.
and I was wondering if there you have examples of how this can work and how fear came, because you had a fire coming to you, and then as a
Yeah. Yeah.
community you had to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, Stella, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, no, I've been very involved, not on the global scale recently, but in the local scale. Yeah, so no, I lived in one of the neighborhoods that was decimated by the fires about a year ago in Los Angeles, Southern California. Um, yeah, and so where the community is struggling with the process of rebuilding, and a lot of the dynamics we've been talking about, you see there, um, uh, and so, there's people want to rebuild their homes, they want to rebuild the community. There's among many people, I'd say a majority of the people, there's a strong understanding that the community can't rebuild the way it had been, because it's in a high fire zone, and so that whatever gets rebuilt needs to be really emphasize fire resilience. On the other hand, there's a people. It's not clear exactly. There's good lists of what you should do in rebuilding your home, rebuilding your community, but there's not. They're all uncertain. I mean, there's only very limited experience that all these things that have worked, in labs and stuff will actually work in the conditions of the extreme conditions of real fire. Um, and then it's also there's just on one hand there's a real lack of institutions that incentivize it properly. The insurance, many of the things on the list of stuff you're supposed to do are not things that the insurance companies know how to model, so they don't pay attention to them, and their business practices don't align with the things you're supposed to do. So if a community gets together and um, puts in some green space, or has a local brigade that's going to go around and put out embers in a fire, which presumably should reduce risks, the insurance companies don't have any way to pay attention to that. So you don't get a financial incentive to invest in the things that you want to do. And then there's a whole crowd of people who there were some manifest failures where the fire department could have done things that it didn't do. And so there's a whole set of people who say, well, the government failed us, and so why should you make us change the way we want to live our lives? Just, fix the government. And so you get these. So what we have been doing is the sort of co-creation that you've been talking about, is running workshops where we just use simple visioning techniques. We call them visioning charrettes. Get the architectural idea in there. But where we ask people to imagine it's 10 years in the future, that things have worked out really well, the community is thriving, ask them to describe what they love about their thriving community, and then what happened in the near term in 2025, 2026 to make it so. And we organize them to help them think a little bit better in systems by having groups that focus on homes, communities, finance issues, governance issues. And it empowers people to think about these issues in a way they haven't, because you have a lot of trauma coming out of an event, like catastrophic event like this, and there's so many things you got to do. Your life is so disrupted. You got to figure where the kids go to school, where you're going to do your laundry, where you're going to live. So this helps people actually think about, where they want to go. It gives them it builds networks and gives them an ability to talk to each other, and it begins to connect. It gives a focus for then all the experts involved, groups to talk to. So they're not just putting information out individually, but there's now a community they can come and interact with. So that seems to have been moving the ball somewhat. Things are still too slow, but there seems to be, a lot more understanding of what needs to be done, and hopefully, some movement towards it. So fingers crossed.
This example is so important, Rob, that you raised, because I think this is the key issue for us when we think of risk management. There are two challenges, and also in terms of effective ways of managing it. The first one is, as you said, sometimes we have the papers, we have all the plans, but no one looks at it and makes sure we know how to do it, things, who is responsible for what, and so on. But to me, the most important thing is what you brought, this experience, is to make sure that the people that are most affected, that are participating in the process throughout the whole process. I mean, from planning until decision making, all the decision making process. This changes everything. And I'll bring one experience that I had. I worked in the UN Risk and Security Department and in Brazil. And we were only a few professionals, risk management professionals, to deal with several projects across the country, which is quite big. And so we had different challenges and threats and so on. And what we did was, okay, let's train the UN professionals on risk management. Let's train them on methodology to make sure that they are able to build the risk assessments. Because in the end of the day, they were the ones on the ground. They were the ones that knew better than us, specialists, what were the main risks that they faced in a daily basis. So that was a really interesting model, I think, in terms of participation, but also to make sure they understood risk management and embraced it in their daily lives. And it changed everything, because in the end, it was possible to do it in an effective way, because it would have been impossible for us to do so effectively as we did. And we only did because we had the community participations and the professionals that were on the ground working.
I'm just wondering how your experience and what Mariana is talking about can be scaled up, because it's different when you're dealing with an event locally. And then we are talking about systemic risk and different risks coming together at the global level, where it's much more difficult to talk to the community, because it's not one community, it's many communities. I guess it's something we need to think about more. I don't know if you have any ideas, any of you, but it's how do you do it at this global level, yeah?
One cut at it is how do you, diffuse innovations, advances, good practice in one place to many. And I think, one way is you basically, you reduce the sort of fear that you talk about by having examples of work. So, you do pilot places, and then you develop networks of, which ASRA is, an important example of being able to disseminate, these practices. So I know in in the fire recovery world, there are communities, because these large-scale fires have become so frequent now. Unfortunately, there are many examples of communities trying to recover and communities trying to repair, so that there are starting to be networks that link those groups together, and becomes very important information sharing. So when you can share community to community, which helps a lot, and then it starts to percolate up to the higher government levels, where they can provide the legislation, say at the state or federal level, to make it easier to do the things that it's turning out that communities need to do. So the how to do it, at the there's sort of less examples as you get higher up in the higher up, because we only have one global level. So I think one topic that I find really, or advantage on this I find really useful and important is, you know, in part is thinking about systemic risk as a silo problem, um, that pretty much any professional or any person who's skilled in anything kind of has a system they work with. Whether you're a doctor, it's like the person in front of you, a farmer, it's your fields. I mean, so everybody works with systems, right? And it's just in some ways what systemic risk is that the system that you're used to dealing with is now connected with and impacted with these other systems that you tend not to pay attention to. They're just sort of part of the background. And now they're moving in ways that change your job, your expertise, what you need to do in different ways. And so, I think we need to have ways to, and we have those silos because people have, limited attention, and you can only pay attention to so much stuff. I think, we need to find ways to help, people break through those silos, and connect where they most necessarily need to do. Just to go back to the pandemic and learning, and one of the things you were saying, Stella, is that you know we our group at RAND has been working with a number of public health agencies, largely in the U.S. Both during and then after the pandemic, and it some of them very, very innovative and skilled public health officials sort of have discovered decision analysis and risk management in a way that it hadn't occurred to them that they needed to understand before. And we even had one person, after we've been working with them for a while, said, "Oh my gosh, I was doing minimax regret for the first month of the pandemic, but I never knew what that was," right? And, and now this individual does, right? And so, it's in some sense that's a breaking down the silos between, what risk managers do and what public health officials do, and bringing those together. So that is, one example of learning. So I think, ASRA is a place which can figure out, how to balance the information overload with breaking down silos. Things like STEER can help. Maybe AI is something that we can begin to use, because that can help us, manage information, lots of information, and help us, focus our attention where it needs to be. But that's only a smidgen of an answer. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think first we need to start by acknowledging how complex it is to manage systemic risk. Let's be honest, that's the first thing. I see two main challenges here. One is when we look to people that are in leadership positions, they sometimes, or most of the time, I don't know, but let's go with sometimes, they don't even understand what systemic risks are. And they don't even are aware sometimes that they are part of the solution, the management system. And the second one is the one that we already mentioned, that the vast majority of the tools and the models that we use in risk management are isolated, are made for isolated risks. So this is why I think it's so important for us to exchange a lot, to make sure that we can cut pathways, because there is an urgency, but on the other hand, it's so complex. So how do we deal with it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Two things that kind of go in divergent directions, if I may. But one is on the technical question. I obviously need to put in a plug for DMDU, decision making under deep uncertainty, which is what much of my work is. But where we use our models and data not as predictive engines, but as what if engines, follow many, many paths in the future, and use that to understand how different risks can interact, where our current practice is particularly vulnerable, what can we do to be have robust and resilient responses that work over a wide range of ways that risk can cascade through the system. So that's a whole set of tools, but I, you important to mention that. And I also think it's a way to try to make regarding our models and data and risk tools as what if engines and not predictions is a way to get a certain amount of humility among experts, which allows many of the co-creation that we've been discussing. But I also wanted to, since you mentioned leadership, just jump on the point that I think one of the reasons I find myself increasingly attracted to the plastic elastic framing that we started out with is I think it's a very useful way to listen to leaders and put them in a bucket of which bucket they're in. And I tend to think that the ones who are in the plastic bucket are perhaps more open to thinking about systemic risk in productive ways because it gives them a sense that there may be things that they've been familiar with that have allowed them to rise to positions of authority, et cetera, but need to change. They need to do things differently because the way that we have been doing things is not going to carry us where we want to be in the future. So that I think is often a useful lens to see to view leadership through.
Yeah, Rob, of course, it can also work the other way because leaders that may think that they can change everything may be also disruptive in not a good sense. Yeah,
absolutely, yes,
because there are this type of leaders or even citizens that think if we burn everything down, then
absolutely,
from the ashes, something new will emerge, and this does not help when we are in a period of systemic risks, because it's not only what they want to do, but also what else is happening out there that may be happening at the same time as they're thinking that they can burn everything down and rebuild it. So I'm wondering, this plastic, we need to see exactly what they mean when they say. So I get what you say. Change is, leaders that want to see radical change can be very, very important, and we need them in this time of periods. But it's very important to also see the values behind change, the losers and the winners, and what they have in mind when they are talking about this change. Because, we live in a period of disruptive leaders. So
I could not agree more with your cautions and and caveats there.
Yeah, just to mention that this is also part of our work, isn't it? In the end of the day, to translate this complexity to practical tools and to make sure that we connect all the theory studies to political decisions process and to the leadership.
I was going to jump a technical thing to add to Stella said, but one of the things the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change thinks a lot about risk, and one of the things it began to do in the last assessment report is add response risk to its understanding of risks. So risk comes from the in the world of climate change, from the changes in natural systems, our exposure to that, our vulnerability to that, and then the IPCC added the response risk. So the way that people respond to the risks can also generate risks, which is exactly what you're talking about, Stella. So you need to I mean, not doing anything is a risk, but responding is a risk, and so that is one of the contributors to systemic risk we need to manage, which goes back to our fear discussion, right? Because people, I think, maybe have a better sense, often have a better sense than sometimes leaders, sometimes experts that there are response risks, and so we need to manage those, understand how to manage those as well. Okay, anyway, Mariana, back to you. Sorry.
No problem. Sorry, I went to other way.
Yeah.
No, but I think this is a good example looking to climate change and everything that we've been discussing, that we know what needs to be done, but looking to the reality and practical terms and the complexity of the world that we live in, sometimes not easy to do all the change that we need in the pace that we need simultaneously, globally.
Yeah.
And I think climate change is a good example because in theory, we all know what needs to be done, but we have some restrictions, political restrictions, when we look to UNFCCC, for example, all consensus.
Yes, yeah.
No, but I'm thinking here that the problem here is not with the experts or with the work that our networks are doing. The thing is that we have to admit that there are interests behind climate change, behind the measures that need to be taken for climate change. And right now, the balance is not on our side. And there, it's much more than expertise and how you communicate it, but it's really about mitigating the losses of the people that feel that their interests are better represented by this side that is saying that there is no actually climate change. So, this makes me think that we need to rethink what the risk is. Is the risk climate change per se, or is the risk the leadership, the global leadership? What is the risk here? Of course, climate change remains a risk, but is this the biggest risk that we are facing right now? I like putting questions.
Yeah. So who then is who are the audiences for the sort of systemic risk assessment and tools that so I mean the global leadership or national leadership obviously is one important audience. Who are other audiences that the ASRA network, people in the ASRA network that should be reaching?
I was going to comment what Stella brought, that it's precisely linked to it. While you were thinking, I was thinking again about UNFCCC, climate change, and that has to do with the audience. And when we look to systemic risks, that in the end of the day, we need to look from global to local. So when we look to global, we have to look to multilateral organizations and such as the UN, for example. But also when we look to the national level, we need to look to subnational and community levels as well, because in the end of the day, that's where the people that are most affected are and the solutions. And that brings me to the Brazilian COP30 presidency, that we spoke a lot about the importance of moving from negotiation to implementation and to bring other stakeholders, because we got a bit stuck in a trap of this, oh no, we need to negotiate at the national level. That's how the UN system works, the UNFCCC. And we see that we are not moving as fast as we should. And so the Brazilian presidency brought this. So let's go for the action agenda. Let's bring other stakeholders because they can do a lot. In the end of the day, we are talking about pollution. We are talking about the industry sector. We are talking about subnational levels that are responsible for the majority when we look, for example, for adaptation, mitigation measures, they are the ones that will be responsible for. So this is so important for us to look not only at the global level, national level, but also make sure that we bring other stakeholders, such as subnational levels, for example.
Yeah, so totally agree, though, that sometimes it's hard to do, but
it is. It is
yeah,
always hard to do.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but in a way, it's also very hopeful to do that, because it means that you don't just wait for the bad leadership to pass and you continue doing things while you have to. And actually, this may be bringing in new institutions that we need, because we are talking about the change that is coming and the future that we don't know how it's going to be, and the multilateral system that is suffering. But I think the way you worked in Brazil, for this COP was creative in a way, and it gave other options that maybe later institutionalized, reused, give venues to organizations, to industry, to people that want to carry on with their work in places that they cannot, because there is no interest from the government, for example, to carry on. So I think it was very, very good. And thank you for reminding us, Mariana.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
And take us to creativity again.
Yeah. And also, gets to this idea of sharing, what's working, exciting innovations, exciting pilots, in one place and spreading that around. Because, I mean, at any level, but certainly at the local level, people, most people, most cities, most communities don't want to be the first that tries something. They would love to be like, a eager follower as opposed to the one that first tries something new and innovative. So the spreading the things that work around, making that available is really important. And often, and you always get, I mean, you always get to a capacity issue too, because I'm sure it's true where you guys are, but certainly so many of the cities and towns that I'm familiar with in California and the U.S. They have a sustainability office, but it's like one person, right? And they want to do all sorts of things, but it's that they quickly get overwhelmed. And so the extent you can make that person, here's a town like you, they did this, just give them a call, do that, makes it so, and then they can go to their city council, the political leadership, and say, hey, this was great in such a town, people loved it there, let's do it here. Makes it so much easier to disseminate good practice. Going back to the beginning, I made a note of something that Stella said about combining different sources of information, and which I think is vital. There's both the combining the different sources, but it's even sort of different ways of talking and different ways of bringing in information. When we've been doing work in Alaska in small villages, which have very high fraction of the indigenous population, and we're been helping them with landslide risk management and flood risk management. So in one community, we wanted to make risk maps. And we were using a Delphi process, where each person, contributes information to their map, and then you combine, show the aggregate to the group, and then people discuss the information, and then you iterate back and forth. And so we needed to combine both the indigenous local knowledge about the landscape with various academic geoscientists. And so we developed this basically online tool where you could we had different maps. You could zoom in on the map and you could draw what you thought about the flood and the landslide risk. And then we were supposed to aggregate that and have a workshop. And when we got to this village, all the academics from both in Alaska and outside had done their bit with the maps because they were very good at doing that, but none of the local people had. And so we improvised, and our team and others ran out and just sat there with the local people and had them talk. And then our research team would draw the maps that as these individuals were talking, and then like show them the map. Is that what you meant? And so that was because they were much more comfortable, talking about what they understood the landscape to be and how it moved than drawing on the computer map. And in the end, we were able to combine the information, and it was actually really, really powerful. And both we got risk maps and discovered new collaborations among the village and the state government that proved really, really powerful. But it was just that ability to get information in the way that people were most comfortable and experience giving it that made it work. So
yeah, Robert, I mean, if I can comment on that, I think it's what you say is very interesting and very important, because I think this is how trust is created again.
Yeah.
Not only between experts and the local community, but also the government, the local government, or whoever was involved in the project. Because then these maps that the academics had created were not just something that came from above.
Mm-hmm.
So it was co-created. I could see how this would work very well in Greece. We are having right now floods. And every time there is a flood, the people from the town or the neighborhood where there was a flood come out and say, but of course, yes, there was a river there, that then a road was built on top of it. Didn't you know? We all knew that this was going to flood.
Yeah.
But of course, nobody had it on the map.
Right.
But so this project, I could see it easily working in many different places where you have floods. And it wouldn't be only that you have a better map, because even if you have the map, maybe you don't have the tools to avoid the flood, but at least people wouldn't be angry with everybody
Yes.
out there. And this helps the decision making, helps when they're choosing their leaders, helps when they're trying to heal their wounds after something happens. So yeah, I think it's a very, very good way to work, and it's a very, very good example, I think, the one that you're bringing.
Totally agreed. I think we spoke about it during our conversation, but I see no other way of managing effectively systemic risks and risks in general if we don't engage and co-create with local communities. That gives legitimacy, but also a local knowledge that they are the only ones that own in the end of the day.
Yeah. And often have to take a lot of the actions. And so it needs to, belong to them. Any final thoughts? This has been so much fun, so interesting. Yeah.
So much trouble in the world, isn't it?
I know.
So much challenge.
I know. Yeah. And it at least, gives one a little bit of hope and confidence, and feels good to, chip away at some of it in conversations like these, and all the good works that are, that are connected here. So thanks so much. Yeah. And
thank you.
see you guys before too long.